For most of my life I've been studying a subject called bushcraft, the practical knowledge of the natural world we can carry with us in our minds and muscles. But it's about much more than just survival. Bushcraft is a treasure trove of wisdom that enables us to feel a real kinship with the landscape. In this series I'll explore the world of bushcraft, starting with our own archaeological past, when hunter-gatherers lived in Aboriginal Britain. Our Aboriginal roots are only revealed in glimpses. My journey begins amongst these 6,000-year-old tree stumps which have recently emerged from the mud here on the banks of the Thames in London. It's amazing. I'm walking through an ancient forest. Of course it doesn't look much like one now, but it's incredible. When you look closely you can start to pick out individual species. This looks like yew. And back there's an oak tree. But I have spotted one other thing that's a real gem. Have a look at this. That there. That, believe it or not, is a hazelnut. Isn't that incredible? So I've seen 3 species here that I can recognise. Oak, yew and hazel. And of course, because I'm very familiar with those woods, in my mind's eye I can put back the leaves, the forest, and I can even see the flowers that would have grown here. When these trees stood, the Ice Age had passed, but Stonehenge was yet to be built. The Stone Age people who walked these banks were nomadic hunter-gatherers, whose lives revolved around bushcraft. It might all seem like ancient history, but what's incredible is that bushcraft skills were still common knowledge just a few generations ago, and were practiced on this very same shoreline. At the turn of the 20th century, people were still fishing on the Thames using hawthorns as fishhooks. And what's really clever is the way they attach the hawthorn to the line. The first thing you do is to put the barb through the end eye of that loop, and then open it up one lay and push it through again, so that it just sits without any knot to hold it in place, just like that. Then what happens when the fish takes this, when it's baited, and goes down into its mouth like that, it toggles and holds the fish fast. At least that's the theory. You need to bait a series of hooks, making sure the thorn is pushed through. These hooks on their short lines hang from a stronger line, and when it's pegged out at low tide, the idea is we're going to catch flounder. This long line fishing relies on the ebb and flow of the tides, and unlike so much of modern life, it can't be rushed. Let's see if we got anything. Ah, there we go. One flounder. Excellent. Another one here, look. And we've got another one.
Well, I'm well impressed with that. I'd have been happy with just one fish on the line, but 3, that's a result. What interests me though is the thought that at the turn of the 20th century there are still people here on the Thames catching fish with just a thorn.
But surviving examples of British bushcraft are the exception. To really understand our Aboriginal past, you've got to imagine a time when trees still stood on these banks. In fact, when forest covered the whole of Britain. The canopy was like a jungle, broken only by river courses. We would recognise the trees, but they were massive, far bigger than any alive today. Just a few thousand people living in small bands shared this land with wolves and bear, hunting elk, wild cattle and deer. Our ancestors camped in improvised shelters or caves, moving with the seasons, a lifestyle some communities around the world still practice. One of the real joys of learning bushcraft, particularly in foreign lands, is that you learn to see the landscape around you through the eyes of the indigenous locals. And that transforms your view of your surroundings. The sky really does become your ceiling and the ground your carpet. In Britain, it's archaeology that provides us that opportunity to give us a new view of our homeland. From Aboriginal Britain, there are no faces, no voices to help me understand our ancient way of life. Instead, we have only archaeological fragments found in the dirt. But what I love is to use what I've learned from my experiences to fill in the gaps between these fragments of evidence. The knowledge of bushcraft can bring our silent past alive anew. When I walk through a piece of beautiful woodland like this, I try to imagine scenes from the past. Perhaps if I was standing here 6,000 years ago, I might just hear the sound of some excited voices in the distance, the smell of a slow fire drifting through on the breeze. And if I went carefully over to the encampment, I might witness a new child being born into the world, one of our ancestors. Born into a world where plants were of the greatest significance. And the first plant that child would have encountered would have been in the hands of the midwife. And it would have been this plant here. Sphagnum moss, used to wipe the birthing from the child. This is an incredible plant. Almost wherever this occurs, it's being used for the same purposes. It's absorbent, so it can be used as a field dressing, and it has a mild antiseptic quality. But it's also been used as sanitary towels and as nappies, and also as a bubble wrap, if you like, to wrap things that are precious, from children to flint axes. It was stone that shaped our Aboriginal past, a material people had worked for over 500,000 years, while metal's only been used for 5,000. So when you stop to think about it, it's not surprising they developed a highly sophisticated stone tool culture. For me, John Lord is the best flint knapper in the country. His understanding and experience allow him to appreciate the skills of our forebears.
These people were incredible craftsmen. We think we know the techniques, but it's the acquiring the skill and putting these techniques into practice perfectly which takes the doing. Sometimes when you're working on stone and you get a problem, these problems aren't new. These problems were there in the past, and when you do get a problem with it, you are concentrating 100%. You forget all else. So just at that small point, you can actually sort of link minds with people from the past.
As the demand for flint intensified, it led to the first industrial land